Okay, surprise, surprise. Same outfit as the last one because I finished tutoring. Now I'm knocking out the last of the video lectures I need to do. So in case I'm feeling too rough after surgery, we're covered. Now, what's cracking me up is I made coffee. Of course I did. And I'm finishing up the cup, and I thought you would appreciate I'm still doing the whole GNC thing. So anyway, this time, this video lecture is for chapters 34 and 35 because I already had other ones for like 36 through 38. But for some reason, I did not have 32, 33, 34, and 35. So that's what I'm doing here. So you get old stuff for the last parts, but I might still get to cover some of it in person on Wednesday. You never know. So, oh, I know that's so annoying, isn't it? Me just sitting here sipping my coffee, but it is what it is. All righty, here we go. We are going to do our slideshow. Um, all right, so chapter 34. We're going to talk a bit about plants, but only in how they match with the whole biosphere. So if you remember Bio 124, well, in 123, I constantly talked about Bio 124. And then I told you at the beginning that in 123, we went from, like atoms and molecules up into cells. That's why 123 is cell biology. And then 124, we move those cells up to tissues and organs, organ systems, organisms, and then we went past organisms. So that's where we are now. We are past simple organisms. We are now looking at how all of it comes together. And I like it because I love environmental science, and that's what a lot of this has to do with. So if you've had me for environmental science before, it's very similar. In the past, I have used some of my other PowerPoints that I use for environmental science when I talk about habitats, biomes, and stuff. But this time, I'm sticking with the book stuff. I just kind of adjusted a tad. So here we go. And I'm done with my coffee, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. I kept this one because I find it interesting. And I do tell people all the time they should totally Google this because while it's terrifying, it's really pretty. So, what happened is it was so polluted that the river caught fire. And it's happened more than once. It's happened quite a bit. This is all of this stuff is what led to Nixon starting the Environmental Protection Agency, which is not really protecting our environment currently. It's actually making things a bit worse because they stopped doing the protection part. But that's a whole other topic. So we are still going to talk about our environment and concerns and whatnot. So first, we're going to start with the biosphere, the whole sucker. Ecology. Ecology is the scientific study of the interactions of organisms and the environment. So it's how all of it gets along. We have biotic factors and abiotic factors. Biotic factors are living components, bio for life. Abiotic, if you remember, when you put a before it in a science term, it negates it. So an abiotic factor are non-living factors. And we're going to talk about these. And both parts are involved in a habitat. The habitat is where the organism survives. So there you go. A moment ago, I just did that whole saying the stuff from like the molecules up to the cells, blah, blah, blah. And then I said we went from the tissues to organs, organ systems, organism. After you are done with the organism, we then move on from there to population, community, and ecosystem. So the population, that's a group of individuals of the same species. Community are all of those populations living together. And then the ecosystem is all of the abiotic and biotic components. So typically I use the class as an example. So organism would be you yourself. Population would be the population of Bio 124. Community would be our GMC community. Um, so you've got people who are taking Bio 124, you have people who are taking political science, you have people who are taking leadership, you have people who are taking math. And so that is the entire community of our GMC. The ecosystem would be everything around us in Rockdale County. So I hope that makes sense. And I'm like trying to get comfortable because I feel like I've been sitting too long. Anyway, some ecologists take a wider perspective and they look at landscape. So, landscape ecology, they're looking at all the different things. Biosphere, bio for life, sphere, spherical, the rounded part. So, that's pretty much the entire planet and the atmosphere around it. And all of Earth that is inhabited by life, all of that is included in our biosphere. I was about to just do the date thing. We don't need dates. But back in the day, nature was considered something that needed to be tamed. And I think that's part of the issue right now is there are too many people way up here who still see it that way. They see nature as something to be tamed and used, when in reality, it's something we are supposed to live in harmony with if we wish to continue living, you know? So back then, they came up with a whole bunch of different chemical pesticides and stuff like that that people loved because they're like, oh my gosh, we can get rid of all the mosquitoes. And that's when they used DDT. DDT was horrible, like absolutely horrible. And this is what started a lot of concerns about taking care of the environment, was because they were just spraying DDT everywhere and it turned out it was dangerous. It was bad. Um, There we go. That's what I was waiting for with the Silent Spring. So in 1962, Rachel Carson wrote, or I should say published, Silent Spring. And what she did was she was pointing out all of the evidence that we were finding of how DDT stayed behind. It was like weakening the shells of the eggs of predator birds like falcons and stuff like that. And I was about to say stringiforms, and then I realized you have no idea what that is. But stringiform, those are the predator type, like falcons and stuff. Anyway, she noticed it was weakening the shells of the eggs for the birds. It was damaging a lot of the fish and stuff like that. But she named it Silent Spring because she was pointing out, if you imagine how creepy it would be to wake up in the spring and not hear the birds chirping or the insects making their sounds and all that stuff. And that's why it's got that name, Silent Spring. That would be a huge detriment to all of us. And this was pointing out that trying to get rid of one thing might be not exactly the best idea. And this is where people started to actually look at the pesticides and see where the problems were. This is legit what they used to do. They would just drive right along on the beach, spraying DDT out everywhere to get rid of the mosquitoes. I don't think it's a surprise that there was later a very marked rise in cancer and other issues because it's flippin' poison. So, anyway, to be successful, organisms have to have adapted to the abiotic factors present in their environments. So, these are going to be energy sources, temperature, water, inorganic nutrients, and other aquatic and terrestrial factors. Climate often determines the distribution of communities. This means how the overall average everything in the area is dictates what lives there. And I'm having a hard time with this because I realize I was about to say we've talked about, and then I thought, nope, that's another class. There's a huge difference between climate and weather. And this is where a lot of confusion comes into place. Weather is just like, temporary. It's your current thing. So like right now, it's drizzling outside. So my weather is drizzling. But that does not mean it is always drizzling. we have a very specific climate where our temperature tends to be a very certain rate. We have a certain amount of precipitation. That is the climate. So, best way to talk about this will be a desert, which we're going to get to all this in just a minute. But when talking about weather versus climate, it is a very, very, very important thing to understand they are not the same. So when you are talking about climate change and some imbecile, you know, says, how's this for global warming? And then throws a snowball, that shows ignorance of what any of this actually means. So when you look at a desert is called a desert because it is dry. It has less than, I want to say less than 2 inches of precipitation, but it's a very small amount of precipitation overall. That is not just rain, that includes fog and mist and everything. So a desert is a desert because it's dry. That does not mean it never rains. If it rains in the desert, the weather at that moment is rain, but the climate is still desert. It is still dry. I feel like I'm just blah on this one, but I'm hoping you understand the difference between weather and climate because that is a very important concept that for some reason a lot of people don't quite understand. So as we cover this, we're talking climate. Now, why this is important is because as things have been getting adjusted, as we are warming the planet, everything's kind of shifting up. And I realize I'm talking a lot on one slide, but dude, you've had me how long now? You should be used to this. Um, we have a lot of showing of the damage we're doing. And I'm not even going to talk about the weather patterns we've got or telling you to look at the recent summers and stuff like that. I'm going to use something else to show you about climate determining the distribution of communities. Two big examples. One, anyone who likes snow crab, you have probably seen that the price is going up. And it's not just snow crab, but like king crab apparently is insanely expensive now. I don't eat it, but my boyfriend was ordering something recently and he was like, oh my God, because apparently I think it was king crab was like $94. And the reason is because how much we have mucked about, our ocean temperature is getting warmer. And so for the creatures that live in a certain temperature, they're having to go north to get into cooler water. So they can't live in the same area they used to. And so financially, that's how it's affecting people who want to eat crab is it's going farther away. So it's getting harder to find. And eventually we might lose them because they're not supposed to just be in the middle of nowhere. They have very specific locations. The other example is mosquitoes. We've always had mosquitoes, but we did not have as many mosquito-borne illnesses as we do in the past, like 1.5 decades, because it used to just be mosquitoes were annoying. Then we started hearing, oh my gosh, be careful about the West Nile virus. And then, like about a decade or so ago, remember, I'm older, so my time limit goes, I can't remember times right now. So I think it was about a decade ago. Feel free to Google this when the Zika virus started to come into Florida. And they actually were giving warnings for any pregnant women in the US to not go to Florida because of the Zika virus. This is because of how much we've been warming everything, that all of the communities that lived in this climate are slowly shifting because the climate dictates what's going to live there. And so they have to move as the climate moves. And that's a huge thing to keep in mind when you're covering these topics. All right. Just showing you how it works. I think we all know the equators here. That's where you're going to get the most sunlight. That is where I legit practically burst into flames. I I was on a boat that went across the equator. Um, that was pretty cool. I got a little certificate and everything. They warned everybody about it. I thought I'd be fine. I had on my sunblock, my hat. I stood out here underneath something and I still got burned. It was pretty bad. The farther you go from the equator, the less sunlight you get because of the way of the sun, the planet rotated. This is also talking about the rotation. So this is explaining where we get our different solstice, where it's the closest or the farthest from the sun. This is why for us, um, our December and January is winter. That's our coldest. And the other side of the planet that's at the same time, it's their summer, which makes sense when you look at it. But I had a hard time understanding this when my friend from Argentina came over and she started school with me in January and she was talking about how it was summer back home. And last year I went and visited her in I think it was the end of June and it was cold. And so it was really bizarre to be packing for cold when I was leaving here as hot as it was. So weird. But anyway, that's how it works. This is just showing you the basic idea on how how it radiates from the planet. You got your water cycle, your rain, not really going to worry too much about it. These are our wind. I'm blanking on the word. But anyway, patterns. How did I miss the word patterns? It's because I'm tired and I've done way too much talking today. Anyway, so here's the direction of our different wind patterns. So if you've ever heard of westerlies, it's literally coming from the west. And sorry, I just blanked because I was thinking about an article I read where they were talking about the polar vortex coming in, and so the higher parts of the US are supposed to have colder than average winter, but us down here, ours is supposed to be a little warmer this winter. So we've got our patterns in the ocean currents. The Gulf Stream is the one most people know about or can remember the names of. And what happens here affects a lot of the weather patterns too. Um, if you trying to find it, there we go. If you have ever heard of this, the rain shadow, what that means is normally that's where there's a mountain and the rain is hitting that, but by the time it gets to the other, it's dry. So if you have ever driven across the country and you've gotten to like Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada, and you've seen it so dry, right on the other side, nice and lush. That's what this is. That's what this is talking about. So imagine, if you will, that this is California and this is Nevada. And so that's what happens. All right, we're getting to our biomes now. There's a whole bunch of different biomes. If it says aquatic, it means water. And if it says terrestrial, it means land. Oceans are one of the aquatic biomes. So you've got freshwater and saltwater. This one is just talking about the ocean. Don't know where my brain just went. Totally blind. So sorry. But anyway, we have different levels of it. There are different levels also in like a lake and stuff like that. Here we have the intertidal zones, estuaries, and wetlands. Estuaries are one of my all-time favorites. So this is going to be a marine biome. So marine means saltwater. In the wide open ocean, you have different things that live there. When you get to the intertidal zones, that's where it's all, you're going to have different things that live there. Wetlands, this is going to be like marshes, stuff like that. Estuaries, estuaries is my favorite. And I'll tell you why in just a second. The estuary is where a freshwater river meets the saltwater ocean. And so it all comes together. And I have a couple of reasons why I like estuaries. One, the fish I study, the Cryptolevius marmoratus, it's mangrove killifish, and that's where they're from. They love this. It's brackish water, so it's not salt water, it's not fresh water. And they're just a really cool fish. They're only like this big, but they are one of the only internal self-fertilizing hermaphrodites on the planet. So cool. And they love to hang out of the water. If you're interested, ask, I'll tell you all about them. I could talk about them for ages. Two other reasons I think it's cool. There are certain areas with estuaries where it's a large enough area that hammerhead sharks have been known to have their pups, their babies. That's cool. I love hammerhead sharks. But the really cool one, which other people might not consider cool, bull sharks. Bull sharks are one of the only sharks that can actually transition from saltwater to freshwater. And estuary is how they can get in there. And so you can have if you've got a big, deep enough river, you can actually have a bull shark, go up there. And that's kind of cool. This is showing you the various different levels of the ocean. So you can see that there's different creatures, different organisms for all the different levels. Photic zone, photo, like light. So that's the area that you're still getting enough sunlight. You get farther down there, that's the aphotic zone. Remember, A to negate it. So this is where you're not getting a lot of light. The twilight area has some, but not a lot. When you get lower, where it says about 1,000 meters, there's no light there. These are these super special type of creatures. Evolutionary wise, so many things have been specially designed for these guys, for them to actually work best in here. And it's not just the lack of light, it's the deeper you go in the ocean, the more pressure. And so they're very, very specialized. Here they show a picture of the anglerfish. It's like a little one way at the bottom. We have a really horrible picture in a moment. But I like to tell people to look up the goblin shark, because the goblin shark tends to be in a lower area and they're so cool because they throw their jaws out and pull them back in, and that's pretty cool. Normally, the pictures you see of them are ugly because they try to show them with the jaws all the way out, and the taxidermied ones are just absolutely horrible, but they're pretty cool sharks. And the blobfish, if you have ever seen a blobfish, he looks weird. He looks like he's got this big old nose, but that's because that is after we have taken him out of the high pressure area. Down in the actual area where the blobfish lives, he doesn't look so weird. But anyway, this is a healthy coral reef. The importance of the coral reef is when it's healthy, it is the most diverse area. The coral itself is living. We talked about that early in Bio 124. And basically imagine this as like New York City. It is like the hub of all of the creatures. And it's very sensitive. You have to make sure not to muck it up. So if it's too acidic or too hot, it kills it. Because again, it's a living thing. It's not just rocks. It's living. And this is where a lot of trouble comes into play, is a lot of the pollution that we dump in there. And 1 or 2 summers ago, the coast of Florida, the ocean was over 100 degrees. And that can start killing off the coral reef. If you ever like to just check things out, I will tell you one of my little pastimes, because I have weird ones, we know this, is if you hear of a shark attack, take a look in that area and find the pollution. Because typically, if you have a healthy coral reef, the sharks are perfectly fine with eating what they find around there. And now I'm not saying this is to negate if somebody's just being dumb. I'm meaning as in like, oh my God, we didn't even know this was possible, that kind of thing. If you kill the food source for the predators and then you jump in their kitchen, they're going to eat, they're going to go. But whenever you see an increase in shark attacks somewhere, so far I have not had an issue trying to phrase this right. Each time I've looked it up, I have found either a dying coral reef, a dead coral reef, or a point source pollution. Point source means you can actually track who's dumping the pollution in there, and it's killing everything in that area. So coral reef, super important. And also, like I said, it's alive. It does photosynthesis. So the coral reef actually helps clean carbon dioxide. And that's another reason it's important. Here's one of the worst pictures of an anglerfish I have ever seen in my entire life. It's pretty bad. Cool thing about an anglerfish, these are all female, just so you know, because the way it works is she absorbs the male. She kind of just sucks them in there and leaves, we'll just say, the twig and berries hanging around because that's all she really needs. And his life is no longer his own. He is entirely there just for sperm. That's it. So crazy. And this is, I believe this one's supposed to be the Florida Everglades. All right. Freshwater biomes, we've got standing water and flowing water. So standing is going to be lakes and ponds, flowing rivers and streams. Lakes and ponds. Well, let me go back one. There we go. Let me tell you the difference between lakes and ponds because some people don't know. A pond tends to be temporary and there's vegetation at the bottom. A pond does not have a water source feeding into it. That's why it tends to be temporary. If it is raining a whole lot, poof, you've got your pond. If it hasn't rained for a while, the pond starts disappearing because there is no constant source. A lake is constantly being fed by a source, whether it's a river, a stream, or even an underwater stream or a creek, something. A man-made lake is still being fed by another water source. That's how come it's considered a lake. Lakes tend to be larger than ponds, and they tend not to have vegetation all the way at the very bottom. Rivers and streams, there you go. They have different habitats along the way. So like a river that's a long straight part or a stream that's a long straight part will have different things living there than when it's like curving around because the fast flowing water will have different things living there versus the slow and that kind of thing. All right, terrestrial biomes. Terrestrial means on land. And so these are going to be broken up into 9 major types. These are going to be primarily explained or distinguished by the types of plants, the types of animals, and the climate. So, quick little thing to try to show you the basic biomes. Tropical forest. Most people have heard of a tropical forest. These are nice and toasty warm and long days, lots of moisture. And that's why we know of them as the tropical rainforests, or rainforests is what most people will say. A lot of human destruction. We are destroying these like crazy. It's absolutely horrible. I have left a few of these checkpoint questions in place, and I figured I would answer them. So, what's happening in some of our tropical rainforests are humans are saying, we need more farming land, we need more livestock land. And the Amazon rainforest has typically been our largest, most important rainforest. Huge hub of biodiversity. It's where a lot of our medications and stuff have come from. But it keeps accidentally catching fire in Brazil, and it takes a little longer to put the fires out each and every time. And people keep saying, well, that's okay because now we can farm on them. This is not a good idea, not just because we're losing an incredibly important biome, but because it will not last as good farming. So I kept this checkpoint question because it asks, why are the soils in most tropical rainforests so poor in nutrients that they can only support farming for a few years? So every time they clear out part of a rainforest, it's only successful at farming for a few years, and they just destroyed centuries of growth for a couple of years. The reason it's poor in nutrients is because the way this area works is everything decomposes super fast because of how moist it is. Everything decomposes super fast, so then the soil takes it up really fast, and then it's like this nice big cycle. It goes really, really fast. That's what keeps the soil fertile for those plants. As soon as you've removed them, you don't have all of the stuff falling down, rotting really quickly. You're trying to extend things. You're trying to keep growing things and not have stuff drop and decompose quickly. And that's part of what causes the issue. All right. Savannas are grasslands with scattered trees. So savannas, think of the Lion King. That's what this is. 30 to 50 centimeters of annual rainfall, mostly grasses, not a whole lot of trees, and you have a whole bunch of insects. That's the main herbivore. Yes, in the Lion King, you're going to see elephants and giraffes. And I'm mentioning those because I'm saying herbivores. You also, of course, remember your lions. But what happens here? Fire has to have fire as part of their ecosystem. This is why I said think of the Lion King. There is a dry and a wet season. And during the dry season, everything dries up. And if the dry season goes too long, the animals don't even have a mating season because they know that there's not enough energy to keep it going, basically. Don't try to create new life, which uses a lot of energy if you don't have energy replacement. And so I always thought that was kind of cool. But imagine in The Lion King, everything's green and lush, and then no rain, everything's getting drier and drier and drier. And then you have Simba and Scar having the big battle. You've got the lightning and then the fire, and it goes rushing through there. And then after that, you see the big storms, you see the rain, and then everything's lush, everything's wonderful. They hold up another baby lion. That's pretty much what happens because you need the fire to clear everything out. That is literally part of the ecosystem here. So the fire goes through there. It clears out all of the small things. So the bigger, more resistant trees survive. The smaller ones wiped out so they don't waste any more resources. The grasses continue to grow because the grass, the main growing part, the shoot, is that right? Trying to think of the vocabulary is right. But anyway, all the grass is the main part that says about the growth is underneath the ground. And so when the fire goes whoosh, the grass is still able to grow. So I don't know. I think that's pretty cool. All right. Deserts. Already talked about this. They're defined by their dryness. They do not have much wet at all. They can be hot or cold. Desert does not mean hot. Desert means dry. And yeah, we covered this in Bio 123. We talked about how water vapor holds temperature. And so in a desert during the day, it can be super duper hot, but at night it can get so flippin' cold because there's so little moisture, it's not holding the temperature. Desertification. This is the conversion of a semi-arid region to a desert. This is happening more and more. We have entire areas that are drying up that used to not be. So our deserts are starting to kind of extend. This, why isn't cold desert an oxymoron? Well, pretty much what I just said, because desert does not mean hot. It means dry. All right. This is showing you I'm gonna say Taiga. Anyway, oh, I can't say that word. Here you go. This one. Mild rainy winters, hot dry summers, periodic fires, firestorms. This is going to be a whole Southern California thing. My brain keeps going to the other PowerPoint I usually use for this that has different pictures, and I keep getting thrown. But this is a picture right here. So the question here, what is one way that homeowners in these areas can protect their neighborhoods from fire? Well, the obvious would be to clear out any dead brush because dried twigs, dried leaves, dried anything is going to catch fire a lot faster. And so if you live in an area like this, you try to keep any dry anything out of the way. So any dead brush gone, you immediately take care of it. Temperate grasslands, mostly treeless, except along the rivers or streams because then they have more of the water. Relatively cold winter temperatures, precipitation 25 to 75 centimeters per year. And North America, historically been grazed by large bison and pronghorn. I used to have a whole thing about pronghorn. I think I deleted it out of this one. Very productive farms replaced most of North America's temperate grasslands. So, what factors prevent woody plants from growing in temperate grasslands? Well, kind of the same thing as with the savannas. It's going to be the not constantly getting enough rain and the fire. That's pretty much it, you know. Um, Also, probably the grazing animals, munch, munch, munch. Temperate forest, temperate broadleaf forest. Growth where there is sufficient moisture to support the growth of large trees, experience wide-ranging temperatures, high annual precipitation. These typically have a growing season of 5 to 6 months, and the canopy of a temperate broadleaf forest more open than that of a tropical rainforest, so the trees are not as tall or as diverse. And my brain realized as I was doing this one that there was something I meant to mention in the previous video lecture about the plants with the xylem and phloem and what made the bark the secondary xylem and stuff like that. And I realized I forgot to talk about that. Oops. I guess that won't be on the test, right? Okay. How does the soil of a temperate broadleaf forest differ from that of a tropical rainforest? Well, the temperate broadleaf forest has a whole lot of inorganic and organic nutrients. So it has a much more fertile soil. Also, I'm going to point out that these tend to have what's known as deciduous trees. Deciduous means they drop their leaves and replace them. That does not tend to happen in a tropical rainforest. All right. How many more slides? Wow, we still have a lot. Oh, I always have a hard time with saying this coniferous. I can say conifer. So I guess coniferous. I don't know, whatever. I can never do that. These cone bearing. Oh, there's the word taiga. I remember that. I just put it in the wrong spot. Taiga is characterized by long, cold winters, short, wet summers. Temperate rainforests of coastal North America are also these. So, how and why does the soil of the northern coniferous, gosh, I'm horrible with that, differ from that of the broadleaf forest? Well, the soil is thinner because of the cold. It has less nutrients. It is more acidic. The reason being is because the needles from the conifers, so like the pine needles, they take longer to decompose, especially when it's cold. And so not having as much decomposing material makes the soil less nutrient. Then we have our tundra. So this is going to be very cold. Permafrost, always frozen, not really stuff that you can grow anything. And it receives as little precipitation as some deserts. So while everything might be frozen, it's not a lot of precipitation. And then that's just showing you that part. All right. Polar ice covers the land north of the tundra, much of the Arctic Ocean, and the continent of Antarctica. Extremely cold year round, precipitation very low, terrestrial polar biome closely interconnected with the neighboring marine biome. That means they all kind of work together. And there's the pretty picture. Sadly, we're losing a lot of the snow, the glaciers, the stuff that covers it. And that's part of where a lot of the concern is again, low precipitation. So as it melts, it's not getting replaced. And so that's part of the problems here. Okay. Skipping over that. This is all about the water cycle, showing it's all connected. So when it's raining, it's adding it, it flows, it goes back up. So it is this constant water cycle. Why this matters? Well, when it's used, it's gone. So You can't just constantly replace it. It's not that we turn on a tap and it magically appears. It is used. And I'm going to give a better example for that in just a second. I want to also make sure to mention the water under. So if you look here where it talks about the groundwater, this is also known as the water table or the watershed. And if you dump something in your ground, it goes down into that water. That is the same water we are consuming. There is no safe place to just dump stuff. And a lot of people are told simple things like, oh, to get rid of an anthill, just dump some gasoline on it. That means you're pouring gasoline into your water. That's coming through. If you're in the city and you're using city water, it's gone through a water treatment facility. And so hopefully it won't be that bad. But if you're on a well, it's not getting treated. You're taking that in. This is something to always think about. It also flows from the north down. And this is why, like, if you get water in North Carolina, it's worlds better than in South Georgia, because the farther it goes, the more it's picking up. It's not just that, but that's one of the things. I said I was coming back to something and I can't remember what it was. What the heck was it? Don't you hate when that happens? Oh yeah. Okay. So when I said wasting water, energy, I think we might cover some a little bit later in one of the other PowerPoints. So it'll come back around to this. Tar sand oil. That's one of the big things people are trying to do, have been for a while, where they're trying to extract the oil that's in these sands, but it takes a massive amount of water in order to extract it. That water is no longer usable water. When we are keeping the various nuclear facilities going, we are using water to run through there to cool it off. It is slowly absorbing radiation. That is water we're not going to be able to continue using. You can't just use up water and then think there's always going to be water. We have this example in California where entire sections have no groundwater left. And you can trace it back to, I can't remember the year, I want to say 2012, somewhere in that general area, where the state of California made it legal to grow your own marijuana. When that happened, a lot of people flocked out there and planted entire fields, diverting streams, and they dried it up, because marijuana is called a weed for a reason. It takes a huge amount of water. That water is gone. It is gone. And so this is why using better practices, we talked, I think it was in last week's video lectures, about sustainable agriculture, sustainable use of stuff, and irrigation. That's why it's important to be careful of that, because it is all connected. All right. Behavioral, not related to that stuff. We're on to a new thing. So this one, it starts off talking some about Meerkat Manor, which I thought was kind of cool. We're going to talk about learning behaviors and social stuff and that kind of thing. So study of behavior. Collectively, your behavior, the sum of an animal's responses to internal and external environmental cues. Various types of behavior. There is something called behavioral ecology. And back in 2000 and I think 7, I helped out with armadillo research in Yazoo, Mississippi for a behavioral ecologist. And I thought that was interesting. It was about armadillos. If you're interested, feel free to ask. I'll tell you about it. It was hilarious. Okay, so we've got proximate cause, which is immediate, or an ultimate cause, evolutionary. We've talked before about natural selection, preserving behaviors that enhance fitness. When you hear this or read this, remember, fitness does not mean, ha ha. Fitness means you're going to survive that area. Totally different thing. Innate behavior, this means it is the same way by all members of a species. So if you think of the peacocks, always the easiest example. You say peacock, most people immediately think of that big plume of tail feathers. Woof, woof, woof. That's their mating ritual. But that is innate behavior. They know they're going to do this. They all do that. Fixed action pattern. This is an unchangeable series of actions triggered by specific stimulus, which we're going to go into a little more detail in just a second. So this one right here falls under the fixed action potential. The goose or duck, whatever this is, which, by the way, if you have not Googled the mouth of a goose, you totally have to. It is petrifying. They have these teeth-like things on the sides of their tongue. Anyway, so the goose knows that all the eggs are supposed to be together. So if one egg is separate, it scoots it and puts it in with the rest of them, so all the eggs are together. No one taught him this. Well, I guess they kind of learned it, but it is a fixed action pattern. It will happen each time. I have talked about the penguins in class quite a few times of the importance of transferring the egg from one penguin's feet to the other, because if that egg touches that ground, it will die because the ground is just that flippin' cold. So this is another example of the behavior for that. Genetic engineering has been used to investigate genes that influence behaviors. They've been trying to figure things out because that's what we do. We want to know why. And cross-fostering experiments are useful for studying environmental factors that affect behavior, because most of us have had the thing posed of, is it nature or nurture? And it turns out it's both. Some things are nature, some things are nurture, some are both. And so that's what this goes with. So here they were looking at this particular gene, and they were looking at mating rituals. Fruit flies, as we've talked about before, are used a lot in genetic research because their generations are like this. So you can learn a lot really fast. So the normal male, the male that has this the proper typical Fru gene, would court females. If they gave the female the Fru gene, she courted females. So basically, lesbian fruit fly. If they mutated the male Fru gene, then that male fruit fly courted males. This shows that the decision to go after male or female can be linked to a particular gene. Does that mean there is a gay gene? No. But it means that, yes, things are possibly genetic. Yeah, this one has to do with mating ritual because notice it says courts. This is just showing you that, like the leatherback turtles, when they hatch, they go towards the water. Now, I will tell you, if you go anywhere that has turtle hatching or stuff like this, you will see that they have posted, like, I want to say, is it Jekyll Island, St. Simon's Island? It's one of those, about light pollution. During the hatching season, you are not allowed to have lights on past a certain time. And that is because how the little baby turtles know to go towards the ocean is the reflection. It's the light. So it is the light of the moon reflecting on the water. And they just know that is where I go. I follow the light. This one I found super fascinating. I actually knew somebody who worked with stuff like this, but it was so funny. My friend Jess, I've talked about her a lot. She also worked with mice where one of them had OCD and she would stack her babies a very specific way, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, here, high interaction mother, as in she is very interactive with her babies, her pups. Those babies grow up to be relaxed adults. The mother who does not interact, kind of neglectful, those babies grow up to be fearful, anxiety-ridden. This shows you that nurture is huge. Then they wanted to see, was it that it was nature, that it was a gene that caused it? So they took pups from the low interaction mother, gave it to the high interaction mother, pups from the high interaction mother and gave to the low interaction mother. And what they discovered was that the ones who were with the high interaction mother ended up actually becoming relaxed adults. So This shows the amount of everything you do with the young actually makes a difference. So, yeah, let that one sink in. Okay, learning. Learning is the modification of behavior as a result of specific experiences. No kidding. Habituation, this is just basically making it a habit. So this is where you learn to respond to a repeated stimulus that conveys little or no information. What I'm about to say is probably going to come across seeming rather cruel or rude or something. Um, but it's like legit the best example. Him, mom, 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 mother, mom, mom, mom. Think of Stewie. After a while, if you've ever been around someone who the kid is there and they keep saying mom, and you're like, dude, respond to your kid, and that person seems to not even notice, that's what this falls under. Um, in my personal opinion, I think that's very wrong. I think you do need to reply to your kid. But it is an example. So if you constantly keep hearing the same thing, you eventually ignore it. I had another example in my head, but then I lost it. So sorry. Okay. Types of learning, just a nice big table, puts it together. We're going to cover a bunch of these. So imprinting, learning limited to a specific time period. Most of us have heard about this, and that's like, the first thing that the baby bird sees, that's going to be its mom. That's an imprint. Song development. So when a bird is hatched and it keeps hearing the same song, that's imprinting that song. This is just showing a picture of a bunch of, I still can't remember, maybe it's ducks. I don't know. But they imprinted on this person, and that person goes around taking care of them. There's a whole story. And then here they found with the imprinting of the song, if the baby hatched and was able to hear the other birds, it then had a very specific song that it would sing. If it was removed from it, it did not have a normal song. So there you go. Yeah. So when people are trying to protect endangered species or bring them back from the brink and that kind of thing, the imprinting causes issues because without having the proper organism to imprint, it makes it difficult. So this is the coolest one. This is a crane where the baby learns to raise babies by how the parent takes care of it. So it was imperative that they were able to mimic the imprinting thing. So this person's job is to basically have a puppet and teach the baby how to be an adult. I think that's kind of cool. And then this one is teaching them how to fly. Uh, yeah, I think that's pretty much good there. Spatial learning, that's about landmarks. We're going to talk about like bees and stuff like that. I'm going to point this one also out to like when you're driving. How many of us have driven places on autopilot because we've done it so many times? That falls under this category as well. This is showing you insects, salmon knowing which stream to go up, and then the bees on knowing exactly where to go. Migration, regular back and forth movement of animals between two geographic areas. They tend to follow the external cues. So gray whales, I think we have a picture in a second. They're basically checking out what the bottom of the ocean floor looks like, the temperature, and magnetic and stuff like that. You also have elephants. They follow the same path. You have migratory birds, so basically they just know this is what we do. And there's the gray whale. This is showing you, I believe, how turtles do their whole path. Associative learning, ability to associate one environmental factor with another. I tend to use this one to talk about class, basically. So associative learning, trial and error. I would like to use an example of Okay. Imagine you're taking a class. I know, hard thing to imagine, right? So imagine you're taking a class and you decide what I have always done is just slam every bit of information in my head right before I take the test. And you do that and you do fine on the test. Okay, this works. Then you do a different class and you try the same method and you don't get the grade you want. And you're like, wait a minute. And then you do it again and you don't get the grade you want. You're like, oh, this doesn't work. So then you adjust how you study and then you actually do a better job and you get a better grade. And there you go. There's other examples, but that one works for me. Then we have social learning. This is observing the behavior of others. This works for a whole lot of things. Main one I like to use is there is a certain primate, and I wonder if it's the vervet monkeys. No, I think that one's different. We're about to look at that one. There's a certain type of primate that would take sweet potato and dip it in the ocean and then bite and dip it in the ocean and bite. So they actually, one of them happened to do this and I guess decided, hey, salt tastes good on the potato. And they all learned to follow. This one is about the vervet monkeys. They see a snake, that's a fake snake, but they see a snake, they raise the alarm to let everybody else know because they have learned that's dangerous. I yell, everybody else survives. That's pretty cool. Cognition, process of perceiving, storing, integrating, and using information. We know you have heard me talk about cognition a lot because I'm always talking about cognitive health. That's what I'm talking about. This is how all of this continues to work. So problem-solving behavior involves complex cognitive processes, highly developed in some mammals, especially dolphins and primates. It's also been observed in some bird species. Survival and reproductive success. Yes, I am trying to finish this because I feel like I've been going on forever and I still have so much more to go. Foraging includes identifying, obtaining, and eating food. So basically what happens, you have a mental picture in your head of what you want, and then you go get it. But the cool thing here, or the important thing here, is you are not going to expend more energy than it takes, or you're not going to expend more energy to obtain food that doesn't have enough energy to replenish. Here's the example, and then I'm going to give you another one. So this is showing you that they are, well, they're trying to show you that they are more likely to go after the smaller prey that doesn't take as much effort. I like to use as an example, like mussels, shellfish type things. If you've ever watched any of the Pixar shorts, there's one called Piper. It's one of my all-time favorites. And it shows the little itty bitty birds that go running up there every time the water comes out. They reach in and they pop up and they eat those little bitty shell things in there. In the Pixar thing, it shows towards the end, it's grabbing all the big pieces, but that's not going to happen because the muscles that hold them closed, the abductor muscles, take so much effort to pop it open. The bigger it is, the stronger the muscles, the less likely you are to snap it open. The teeny ones that are easy to pop open don't have enough food inside. It's a wasted time. That's why you typically see the same size being popped open all the time. If you ever watch an otter eat, they'll grab like a scallop, but they don't grab the big guy. They grab the medium guy. It's not that it doesn't want the bigger piece of meat. It's just makes no sense to try to break something open that big. So that's what that falls under. Meh. So this is talking about various types of communication. You've got sound, you've got sight, you've got pheromones, you have a whole bunch of other things. So I think we've talked about that before. We have talked a lot about the mating rituals randomly, so I'm not going to worry about that. We are going to talk about the animal mating systems falling into three categories. We have promiscuous, monogamous, polygamous. Promiscuous, no strong bond at all. They just bounce everywhere, whatever, wherever. think back in 1, 2, 3 when I was talking about the hydrogen bond. That would be our promiscuous. Monogamous, mono for one. So one male, one female, shared parental care. They both help take care of the babies. Polygamous, poly for many. So this would be one individual of one sex mates with several of the other and usually consistent with one male and many females. Mainly because in this kind of scenario, they're going for the more offspring. There are a few where it's the other way around, where it's one female with many males, but that's a different thing. I mean, it's still called polygamous, though. Needs of offspring and certainty of paternity help explain the differences in the mating systems and the parental care. I deleted a bunch of the slides to just try to save time, but I kept this one because I think it's cool. This dude actually holds all the eggs in his mouth. His mouth, yes, it's the male, until they hatch. And then he's like, kind of like the seahorse, which we talked about previously. Endocrine disruptors. Diverse group of substances that affect the vertebrate endocrine system by mimicking a hormone or by enhancing or inhibiting hormone activity. We've talked about our endocrine system. This comes back to the previous chapter where we're talking about DDT. We've also talked about some of the other stuff when we were covering endocrine systems. So endocrine disruptors have been linked to fish that are just like, meh, who cares about their territory? Salamanders that will ignore mating cues. Birds that don't build the nest properly. Mice that just don't care. So when it says inexplicable risks, it's like they're not afraid of cats or anything. And then the male stickleback not actually keeping track of their nest. How this happens has to do with all the crap that is ending up in our water system. And so it's the stuff we are pumping out is actually turning parts off on a lot of the animals. And that is disturbing. Social behavior and sociobiology, we're getting there. Woo! Social behavior, any kind of interaction between two or more animals. Sociobiology, literally just the studying of all of this. Territory, that's the area that it decides this is my spot, get off my lawn, that kind of thing. I don't know why I keep this slide in. I do every time. It gives me such anxiety seeing all those birds. Don't know why. This is an example of a coyote basically marking its territory. It's peeing there, so anything else that comes around smells it and knows this is mine. Many species, they have a lot of conflicts over the limited resources because only so many can be there. And a lot of these will be settled by agonistic behavior. So this can be a threat, a ritual, it can be combat, it can be a fight, it can be anything. This is showing you a couple of snakes battling it out for a territory. A lot of animals can live in social groups that are maintained by agonistic behavior. So we have like a dominance hierarchy. That means, hey, I'm top dog. Pecking order in chickens, that's literally a thing. The main hen will peck, 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 and she's reminding everybody, I'm the top. Hierarchies among females within a wolf pack. You've got, again, if you've ever heard that top dog, that's why there is that flavor saying. Many social behaviors are selfish because natural selection favors behaviors that maximize an individual survival. Altruism is when an individual brings their fitness down in order to help others in the population. So doing something in an altruistic way is basically trying to make life better for others, not just for yourself. So, concept of inclusive fitness describes the individual's success at passing on its own genes, but also helping the close relatives continue to survive. So, natural selection favors the altruistic behaviors for relatives. That is called kin selection. So, trying to make sure that your family survives. And they did a study with these ground squirrels where they found the ground squirrel was more likely to alert that there was danger around if the mother or sisters were nearby. And I'm getting distracted because it sounds like the rain is picking up and that's getting my attention. All right. And I'm almost done. Yes. Jane Goodall. She recently passed. I find that very sad, but she did so much. She spent decades studying chimpanzees. If you have never heard of or read about Jane Goodall, do so. She was phenomenal. She went out there and lived with them, and she was with them for so long that they kind of accepted her as one of their own. So she was able to actually see how they were. She got to see just how intelligent they were, how they would not only use tools, but they would make tools. And no, I don't mean like, a pipe wrench, but they would want to get termites out of a mound. So they would grab a stick, remove all the extra stuff, and put it in there. They had great logic skills, incredible bonds, everything. And so she studied them to learn more about them. And her doing all of this stuff is actually what led to a lot of change in how behavior was looked at and how to better, I'm blanking on the word, study it and that kind of thing. This is a picture of Jane Goodall and the chimps. Yes, she was that close to them because she legit just hung out with them, which I think is pretty cool. And look at that baby. Okay. Variations in behavioral traits such as personality, temperament, talents, and intellectual abilities make each person a unique individual. So again, it is both nature and nurture that can shape the behaviors. They did a lot of studies with twins. Some were identical twins, some were fraternal twins, and they found out things change. They might have the favorite color. They might have separate favorite colors. If you look at a bunch of the different studies, some of them, the identical twins were separated and raised completely differently, but then they both still found the same stuff, very similar, the same favorite food, but then they would have a different favorite movie and stuff like that. So it shows there is a lot that does seem to be genetic, but there is a lot that is based on how you're brought up. Remember back to the mouse that I was talking about with the mouse mommy who is super interactive, ends up with babies that are chill. And the neglectful mom who's always on her phone and not actually paying attention to her kids ends up having super high anxiety kids, that kind of thing. And yes, I know the mouse isn't looking at her phone, but that's a really good way to equate it to now. So this is just basically reminding you that it's all together. It is not just one, it is both. So when the next time somebody asks you if it is nature or nurture, you tell them it's both. That means you do not have to be exactly how you were raised. You've got a choice in it. It's just you might have to work a little bit harder because you might be predisposed to a few things. And we talked about some of this in genetics. And in class, I would love for you to ask me more questions because I would like to go on to more of this, but I've been doing this forever. My battery is almost dead and I need to wrap it up. And so I guess that's it. Peace.